Hi, my name is Kate, and I love to read. Like, I was carrying books around with me before Kindles were a thing. So I decided to start a podcast where I interview the authors of some of my favorite books, ask them all of my questions so that I can read between the lines of the books. Welcome back to another episode of Between the Lines. I'm here today with Elaine Murphy, who is the author of Look What You Made Me Do and I Told You This Would Happen. So we're going to be talking about that today. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Of course, thanks for asking me.
Yeah. So first I did want to get to know a little bit about you. So when did you know that you wanted to be an author?
I've always known that I wanted to write something. I think as I got older, I realized that was a harder goal than I had originally thought, but I always liked writing, but it was the thing that I always came back to. I even went to film school for screenwriting, and then basically as soon as I graduated, for some reason, I switched over to writing prose, and then I just realized I really, really liked it. I had a lot to
Yeah.
learn about it, getting into the query trenches, getting rejected, learning how to refine my writing, but I kind of always knew that I wanted to do it. I knew that it was going to be harder than I expected, but I have a day job and I've always been writing in the evenings and just sticking with it.
Oh, nice. That's cool. So what is your writing process like now? So do you kind of like know where stories headed when you start, or do you figure out along the way? How does that work for you?
I'm a bit of both, a plotter and a pantser, so I always know the gist of the story and the general trajectory. I try to
Hmm.
map out like the inciting incident, the first act turning point, the midpoint, the climax. I try to know where I'm going so that I can keep myself on pace and not lose kind of control of the story. But I
Hmm.
tend to know something like they'll have a big fight, but I don't know what they're going to fight about or why they're going to have a
Okay.
fight at that moment. I just know that they will. And then I hope as
Right.
I get to that moment that I realize why they're going to have that fight and that it works for the story. But I know that they're going to have a fight. I just don't
Hmm.
know what it's going to be until I get there.
Yeah, so you're kind of like fluid with it. Like you know generally what you're gonna do, but you can kind of improvise along the way still.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if I told you this would happen, I knew that she was going to find this note and it was going to lead to like a series of events, but I did
Hmm.
not know what those events were. I just hoped that cool ideas would occur to me as I got to each point, basically.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's kind of
Um,
a fingers crossed process.
yeah, yeah. So what about your characters? So how do you get to know them? Is it kind of the same thing? Do you get to know them while you're writing, or do you kind of write with them before you start the story?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I try to do a character profile before I start. It's part of my procrastination process mostly. Like I'll look for an inspiration photo, I'll make a little
Yeah,
Word doc, and I'll try to write like a little bio. Sometimes when I'm just writing the bio, it's stream of consciousness, and so whatever I write sometimes comes as a surprise to me as well in that process. But then as
yeah,
you're writing these, they develop themselves, right? They kind of get out of control. Like you'll write a scene of dialogue and it just flows, and then you'll realize, oh, that's what they're like. So it's a
yeah.
bit of both. I try to know, but I don't try to force it to stay in a box if it's not working. I'll try to let it kind of come about more organically because I find that if I have like a joke or a line or a scene that I want to write and then I try to write it when it's not meant to be there, you can tell that I'm forcing it. So I try to let the characters develop themselves, but still serve the story in the way I need it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So, with the book we're going to talk about today, the I told you this would happen. Part of it was from demand from readers after your first book. Was that correct?
The publisher asked for it. So the first book
Oh, the
hadn't come out.
publisher. Okay.
Yeah, so the first book came out last year in July and last year in
Hmm.
February. So
Hmm.
6 months, 5 months before the book came out, the publisher asked me to write the sequel.
Nice. That's awesome. So, what was it like getting to return to writing those characters? Because were you planning on returning to them when you wrote the first one? Okay.
No, when I wrote the first one, I was like, done. Story complete. And then when I got the request for the sequel, I wasn't going to say no because I was happy to
Right.
have somebody be interested in a book, but I was like, okay, but what's it going to be about? So,
Right.
the good thing I think about returning to a book is that I did know all of the characters really well, so I
Hmm.
could sort of mine their backstories to find
Yeah.
future problems for them, but I did
Yeah.
not know what the plot was going to be. I agreed to write it, and then I made up the idea because I
Okay.
had absolutely no plans to write anything further.
That's crazy. What, so we kind of know then what prompted you to write this second one. What prompted you to write the first one? Like, where did you come up with the idea for that one?
I always kind of forget where the initial inspiration struck, but there's a saying like a good friend will help you move, but a true friend will help you bury a body. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking of that. And then I have a sister, and she's not a killer. I always have to tell everybody this. It's not a true story. But I thought to myself, if she came to me and said, "Hey, this thing happened, would you help me?" I feel like we're supposed to be like, "Yes, I'll help you." But I would
Mm-hmm.
not help my sister. She would fully blackmail me. And so I use that as a jumping off point to be like,
Nice.
well, what if you made the mistake of saying yes and now your whole life is being dictated by this series of events? And then I had
Yeah.
to amp it up and make her a serial killer. So it's not like a one off and she's blackmailing you for like money. She's
Right.
blackmailing you to continue to bury bodies or else.
Yeah, it was such a unique plot line. I loved that for both of them. And this, so then how would you describe I told you this would happen in a couple sentences?
So I told you this would happen is Carrie's story. So at the end of book one, her serial killer sister is dead, and Carrie's dream is to have a safe, boring life. And she's like, awesome. Now I'm going to have a boring life. And then she realizes that a crime she committed in the first book is not quite as unresolved as she hoped it would be. There's a note out there pointing people in the direction of what really happened, and she's the only one who knows that it points to her. So now she has to continue committing like increasingly serious crimes to solve this clue before anyone else can in order to get the crime-free life that she really wants. But she can't seem to draw the line in the sand to say, okay, I'm going to stop here. She's in so deep that she has no way to go but forward, no matter what that means morally or ethically or murderously. She's in.
Yeah. Yeah,
She can't go
I
back.
feel like that like really sums up the tension of the story the whole time is like she so badly wants everything to be normal and then at the same time it just absolutely can't be. So the whole time you're like, how is she gonna get this?
Yeah, exactly. She's like, I want no more crimes. I'll just commit this one, and then that will be the last one for sure. And then everything
Right,
goes wrong constantly. It's like, okay, just one more. She's like in
right.
any type of ad, just one more. This is the last one, but it's
Yeah.
never the last one.
Yes, yes, that is definitely it. And I think you did market it that it could technically be a standalone. I recommend reading both of them, but people could technically just read this one and it would all still make sense, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that you'll get more like more out of the story if you
Yeah.
know the backstory, but it was intended to be like if you hadn't read the first one, hopefully there's enough information here for you to understand what happened to enjoy this story. It's more like
Mm-hmm.
the continued adventures of Carrie as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
a continuation of the first story. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think with any series, you're gonna get more out of it if you've read all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. So, we are going to talk about spoilers. So, I say it every episode. If you haven't read it, just pause and go read it, and then you can come back. But if you're here because you already read it, you can obviously keep listening. So, one of my favorite descriptions of Carrie at the beginning said she was a 28-year-old stationery designer with an undeniable or unenviable ability to attract psychopaths. So, what do you think it is about Carrie that makes her attract psychopaths?
I thought about that a lot, and I think part of it is that she's basically been groomed to do your bidding. And she's
Hmm.
also, like when you're a kid and someone's picking at you, they say like don't react and then they'll get bored and move on. Carrie
Hmm.
always gives you a reaction. And I think
Yeah.
if you're a psychopath like Becca, like Footloose, you just want to keep poking her because she never stops delivering on that response you're looking for. And so I think she's
Yeah.
fun. I think she's fun for them because she never just cuts you off. She doesn't draw the line. She participates even while she's grumbling about doing it. And I think for a lot of people who want to, harm other people, that's a great person to target because she's she's basically has a sign in her says it says victim and they're looking for one and she's like, okay, here I am.
Yes, that is a really perfect description. That's like exactly what goes on through both of the
Yeah,
books.
I think even when she tries to stand up to them, they're like, no. And then the fight is fun for them as well. So she just always provides entertainment, and that's what they're looking for.
Yeah,
And she hasn't figured out how to stop.
you're right. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It kind of, the second book kind of focuses a little bit on trauma and PTSD, given what she's been through. And at one point, when she's reflecting on it, she thinks, I don't have post traumatic stress disorder. I can't have post traumatic anything when my trauma is still all too present. So that kind of like confused state that she's in, like, have I been traumatized or am I still actively being traumatized? Kind of leads her to like questioning herself. So then it also turns into like, am I being paranoid or is this just another bad thing happening? So, how did you approach using a traumatic experience to kind of make her a questionable narrator at the beginning of the book?
Yeah, so, you know, for a lot of us, if we hear something that goes bump in the night, we think, okay, it's the house settling, it's the wind. And 99.9% of the time, knock on wood, that's all it is. For
Yeah.
Carrie, it's the inverse. Her life experiences have told her it's a serial killer in the closet. And so she's got a war now with, like, okay, the serial killers in my life are gone. I should be able to have this normal life. I should just be thinking to myself, okay, it's just the house settling, but her lived experiences tell her it's not. And so
Yeah.
also like the experience, the trauma that people think she's experienced is simply the, confrontation with Footloose. So they think, okay, your trauma is this little ball. And she's got this whole, history of trauma that informs all of her choices. And so for Carrie, it's a bit more about I want this boring life. I want to believe it's true. I'm not going to overreact, but dear God, my life experiences have told me that there's a serial killer in the closet. I've got to look in the closet. I've got to get a knife and look in the closet. I think it also
Hmm.
is the reason that, some of us wouldn't go into a dark barn in the middle of the night. But for Carrie, she's like, I've got to, because whatever's in that barn is going to come for me if I don't go confront it. So I think it informs her
Right.
choices in a way that we wouldn't have to relate to because we haven't been through all this trauma. She knows that if she can't run away from it, it's going to keep coming. So she has to start confronting it. And
Yeah, that's actually kind of an interesting dynamic because it's the fact that she tries to confront it that kind of perpetuates it over and over again. Like,
and
normally you
if she
hope if you confront something, it fixes.
yeah, like everything she tries fails basically, and so she has to keep
Yeah,
using more extreme methods, even though her whole goal is not to be using those methods at all. But
right.
her hand is forced, and she's had so much practice that she kind
Yeah,
of just knows what to do at this point.
yeah. Yeah, especially so she's really been trying to have that normal life. But
Mhm.
it feels pretty impossible with Becca as her sister, especially once she started blackmailing her to help her hide her crimes. So, how do you feel about what has done to protect herself? And how justified are her actions since she wouldn't do them on her own? Like, her sister's definitely provoking the actions.
I think at the very start, the first body, the first two bodies, you can say that Carrie is a victim of these circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't say that for 13 more bodies. Like
Yeah.
at some point, Carrie is a part of her own problem. And there's, I think, a line at the end of the book when she says something like, Carrie's done a lot of bad things. And she talks about how, like, at first you're just wearing a mask trying to get through it. But at some point you realize it's not a mask, it's just you. And I think that's very much true for Carrie. So I think she's doing bad things. I think she thinks in her mind it's for the right reason, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't keep justifying it forever. So Carrie's skill absolutely is justifying what she's been doing. But I think at the end she accepts, okay, these are bad things, but I'm gonna do them because I'm so far in. I still
Yeah.
see light at the end of the tunnel. I'm just gonna do whatever it takes to get there, and then hopefully once she gets there, she can close the door on the past and forget it. But she's done bad things. I wouldn't say that she's
Yeah.
a victim anymore. She's definitely one of the perpetrators.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gone on for pretty long at this point. Um,
Yeah.
and it later in the book, as you were kind of referencing, she's thinking about the situations that she's gotten stuck in because she's Becca's sister. And she's thinking about, like, I've wanted help for as long as I can remember. But that's the thing about sociopaths, about Becca. You're afraid to ask for help, not just because of what might happen to you, but because of what will happen to everyone you care about. And those fears are like pretty common with people who are related to abusers in some way.
Mhm.
But sometimes she does have these like good moments with Becca where she is having fun almost or enjoying this sisterly relationship. So how did you approach like having realistically light moments amidst like all the really dark moments with her.
I think a part of the intention is to balance the tone. So sometimes, because they're sisters and they bicker all the time, we can make that
Hmm.
funny. But I think if you put it into like a dark situation, like they're burying a body in the woods, but
Yeah.
they're bickering while they do it, like they're in the basement opening boxes, but they're bickering while they do it. Becca doesn't really do anything objectively nice for Carrie, something that someone would do for us that we would think is nice. She eats all her food, she makes a mess of her home, she mocks her, she stalks her, she steals her phone. She's a nightmare.
Yeah.
But I think that's the dynamic that Carrie is used to. And I think because so much of what happens with Becca is dark, that when Becca
Hmm.
is just verbally jabbing her, to Carrie, that's
Hmm.
like her reprieve. That's the opportunity to take a deep breath. And I think for
Yeah.
me as the writer, the opportunity to make it funny. We can be doing this really dark thing and we could be talking very seriously about what we're doing. But I like the irony of them just bickering about,
Yeah.
who did what earlier in the day and who's annoying who while they're burying a body.
Right. Right. By the end of it, Carrie feels like she's figured out a situation that will keep Becca behaving. Do you think that there's any way for that to actually be true with Becca?
No, not
Yeah.
not at all. And I don't think Carrie thinks it either.
Yeah.
Carrie said the words that she's supposed to say, like "Don't kill
Hmm.
anybody else." And Becca said what
Yeah.
she's supposed to say, "Okay, I won't." But
Right.
they would both be foolish if they thought there was any chance that that would be the case going forward. So yeah,
Yeah.
if there were a victory and there's no plans for one, Becca would fully still be killing people.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially since hers are such like in the moment like rage killings basically. I feel like someone's always going to be pissing her off.
Yeah, she's always going to get the urge. She's had them for her whole life. They wouldn't just stop because Carrie had asked her to stop. So
Right.
fully, Becca just said what she was supposed to say. Carrie said what she was supposed to say, but those are just their lines. Becca is a
Yeah.
serial killer, and she will
Yeah.
never stop killing until she is stopped. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, I don't know if you can even talk about it, but was that the final book? Do you have any other ideas for another book, or is that like not something you could talk about?
There's no book planned right now. No one
Okay.
has asked for one, and I'm not going to start writing it if they don't because I don't want
Yeah.
to spend time on it if they don't buy it.
Right.
If there were another book, Becca would fully be still killing people, and I think it would be like the ultimate final showdown between the two sisters. No
Yeah.
more Carrie as accomplice, more Carrie as like an antagonist to Becca. Um,
Yeah.
but there's nothing in the works. So the book was
Yeah.
intended to end same as book one, whereas if there isn't another book, you get enough closure,
Oh yeah.
but there's like a tiny crack in the door where you could see where it might go if need be.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, where can people follow you so they can stay up to date with everything? Just kind of plug whatever.
I have a website, Elaine-Murphy, or yeah, Elaine-Murphy.com. I'm most active on Instagram at Elaine M Books and also
Mhm.
on Twitter with the same handle.
Yeah. Awesome. So I will have all of those links in the show notes too so that people can go there. And then I have one more question that I'm starting to ask people at the end. What have you read recently that everyone needs to know about?
Oh man, I always forget everything I've read as soon as I read it.
Yeah,
Um,
I've had
I
that
just
before.
read Simone St. James's
Yeah.
most recent book, The
The Book of
Broken.
Cold Cases.
Yes, the Book of Cold Cases. I thought that that one
Yeah.
was really good. I loved her
Yeah.
last one, The Down Motel.
Hmm.
Um, I forget everything I read the second I read
That's
it. If I had
okay.
my e-reader handy, I would just look at my
Right.
most recent. You can also look at my Goodreads because I do document everything I
Yeah.
read on there. Yeah, so
Nice.
and
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Karen. He's a British crime thriller writer. I've read all
Hmm.
of his books. Um,
Nice.
he's my absolute favorite.
Yeah. I do always put the Goodreads link in the show notes as well. So people can definitely go there and see everything that you're reading. And
Yeah.
otherwise, thank you for being a guest today.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me. It was great talking to you.